Hello, my name is Lynda Brown, and welcome to Meet the Candidates. It's my pleasure to bring this one-to-one question and answer forum to you. You know, in speaking with people around town, it's come to my attention that sometimes folks don't really know who might be running for a particular office, or even at times who's representing them presently. So this is one way for residents to get to know who's running for what office and to get to know a little bit more about the candidate and the issues that are important to them. I'll be asking local candidates questions that are pertinent to the office that they're seeking. They'll be about different issues facing the city and getting their responses and what they would do to either change or build on these issues. Now, notices inviting candidates to join in on this forum were sent out to all who are running. The ones that you'll be seeing in the interviews are candidates that responded. However, before I start, I'd like to take this opportunity to say a big thank you to HC Media for opening their studio to me, along with the help of their wonderful staff and equipment. So much goes into being able to do something like this, and I appreciate it so much. They are one of Haverhill's gems. So, we're going to get started with our first candidate. Hello, I'm here with Councillor Tim Jordan. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Lynda.
Thank you for actually doing this. I really appreciate that. So we're going to jump right in. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready. Let's go.
So tell us a little bit why you have decided to run again.
Sure. Really because I feel like I'm making a difference. I ran with the hope that, my skill set, partly as a financial consultant, certainly I'm well aware and professionally helping people, living within a budget, investing for their future, whether it's their retirement or their kids' education, and bringing that point of view as a business owner, as well as someone who understands budgeting, is critical to the city, and making sure that we are taking a longer term view. I feel like for years that hasn't been the case. I feel like too often long term for a lot of politicians is the next election.
Right.
And I think we just need to kind of change that and make sure we're keeping that in mind and make sure we're not, mortgaging our kids or grandkids' future to save a dollar today, but it's really not in our best interest.
Right, because you pay for that later on.
Exactly,
You pay for that definitely.
Usually many times over, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Tim, what do you think is one of the most important issues that the city is facing right now as a council member?
Sure, yeah. I think there are several. I think a big one for me certainly is the condition of our buildings, the infrastructure. I helped highlight that this past year, namely over at Constantino when all the water was leaking in, Haverhill High School, particularly the pool, also the gymnasium over there. Really making sure that, again, we're being prudent with our money, because if we're trying to do the short-term patch jobs, but you end up costing you a lot more in the long run, it's actually doing a disservice to the taxpayer. So that's a big issue I think we have. Obviously, public safety is another area of big concern, particularly what's been going on lately.
Absolutely.
And not really just lately, but really over the last several years with the gang activity and, quite honestly, our police force and our fire being understaffed. So how do we handle that? What's the best way to address it? So I'm glad that a lot of these conversations are happening. I sometimes wish things would change quicker, but one thing I've certainly learned in the last year and a half is you've got to be persistent. You need to be dogged about it, and you can't just let things slip.
Well, I think that's how change comes about, right?
Absolutely.
It doesn't come about overnight. You just have to keep on going and going at it. I totally agree with you.
What's that saying? The overnight success story that was 20 years in the making? I think there's a lot of truth to that.
It sure was. That's me, right? But let's talk about resources, okay, and how short we are in so many areas in the city government. And you go to the DPW and in the police department. How would you, as a city councilor, work to say, I know you don't have control of the budget, I do know that, but How does that work for you to see that? And it's limited for
Sure.
you.
Yeah.
Right? Really
Yeah.
limited for you.
It is limited, but I think it's not as limited as sometimes we're led to believe, or it's certainly not as limited today as it was several years ago. And the reality is that right now we have a record high. This past year, our free cash was certified at $12.4 million.
I know. That's great.
You know, we heard last year that we were going to spend roughly $5 million of that free cash, but the reality is we went from, I believe it was $10.1 million up to $12.4 million. So when we were told a year ago that we couldn't afford to replace the track, for example, at that time because we didn't have enough money, and then you watch the free cash balloon by over $2 million, my answer is that's not true. We could have afforded it, and we wouldn't have had our high school track team miss an entire home season where this past year, the Haverhill Invitation, the Ottaviani Invitational, after 40 years being held here in Haverhill, was held in North Andover. That's criminal to me. You know, thankfully, you know, myself and others kind of stuck and hammered that point home, and now that track is being replaced.
I know, that was really good news. That's really good news for the kids.
It's great news, but I think we just have to be careful and be honest, really, with the taxpayers, that when we're saying we can't afford something, can we afford it or can we not? And sometimes I'd almost say, like, we can't afford not to do it, you know?
Well, do we want to wait till that time, though?
Exactly.
Can we say that?
Yeah.
We can't afford to not do that.
Yeah, and I think on that point, Lynda, you know, a lot of times by delaying the repairs that we should be doing, again, it costs us a lot more in the long run. I mean, I've used the analogy with like the lack of maintenance and the understaffing of our maintenance department in the schools in particular, to the analogy of you can save money with your car if you don't change your oil. Now, you'll save that money every 3,000 or 5,000 miles, but eventually you'll seize your engine. Replacing your engine is going to be a lot more expensive. I kind of feel that's true of what we're doing and the way we're, again, understaffing and under-maintaining our buildings, that they're going to crumble and fall apart decades earlier than they should be, and we're in the crisis when right now we get several schools literally falling apart, and we're saying, how do we do this? What do we do?
Right, exactly. I mean, let's face it, and these are our children.
Correct.
Right? These are our number one resource.
Number one resource, you're absolutely right. Yep.
They absolutely are. So let's switch a little bit to talking about this vibrant, thriving downtown we have, but it has to be maintained.
Yep.
And you also have to balance it with other neighborhoods. I mean, Haverhill has a lot of various neighborhoods that are inner city to quite rural.
Absolutely.
So how are you as a council able to balance what happens downtown, how much time and energy and money goes into that to what goes into neighborhoods?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're all critical. It's part of what makes Haverhill special, really, is the fact that we have a very urban core that's got some great restaurants and a lot of great activity that's taking place down there. And then you've got the working farms, you've got your Highlands District.
Absolutely.
You've got like Paul Prue and Mary Fennessy, what they do with the summer concert series every Friday night. I mean, there's so many great things that happen, and really a lot due to volunteers. So speaking of those volunteers with the downtown, you know, obviously I've been involved with Team Haverhill since it started, but a couple of the Team Haverhill champions that are doing a lot in the downtown, Jeff Grassi, Lisa Marzilli, Carl Brunel, Kevin Burke, you know, what they're doing right now, again, purely as volunteers, doing a lot of the cleanup down there. And, you know, I just this week followed up with the mayor and Allison Harquist, his chief of staff, and Mike Stankovich, because Lisa gave that presentation about the cleaner and greener downtown. They've been doing their part. So far, the city hasn't done what they were saying they're going to get to, which is fixing some of those bricks, and which is a safety issue as well as it's not very attractive.
Absolutely.
So I'm hoping that they'll get to that. But again, back to what I said earlier, you have to be dogged and stay after this, and that's part of one of the things I think I'm pretty good at doing. So
you are.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
But you know, and I was just downtown today on Riverfront doing some weeding at you know the park down there. So we all are down there doing things, and I love volunteering. And I think it just makes a wonderful community, but it has to be done not just with the city. But with,
we do,
and to your residents.
You're right, and I mean, I think that point about limited resources, there's truth to that. So the more volunteers that are willing to do it, and now you as head of Brightside, you know it, that program does not exist without a lot of quality volunteers.
Exactly, absolutely.
And even thinking it back to the downtown, like Team Haverhill with the River Ruckus Festival, which I've been a big part of for a lot of years. To me, that's like the best day of the year to be here in Haverhill, but that couldn't happen without so many volunteers. I mean, there's a lot of core Team Haverhill members that do that, but there are a lot of volunteers that come that day and help with the cleanup and the setup. And again, we're fortunate that we have so many, I really say, unsung heroes in the city.
Absolutely. Well, I want to make sure I get a couple more questions.
Yeah,
into
sure,
you,
I'm
let's
sorry.
No, you're doing great, you're doing great. You know, a couple of towns and cities, I should say, are moving from at-large to councilors to ward
Yep.
councilors. What is your opinion on that?
Sure, yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, first and foremost, I'm glad that we're going to have a charter commission that's going to really look at this and study it, and at the end of the day, hopefully put it in the ballot so all the citizens can vote and say what they really want.
Exactly.
I see pro and con to both, to be honest.
agree.
You know, I guess my concern for the ward councilor system, and partly it's a change, and we all know change can be hard, but my concern is right now, presumably, all 9 of us city councilors are making our decisions based on what we think is in the best interest of the entire city. And my concern, I guess, is that if you have the ward councilors, they're going to be hyper-focused on what's good for just their section as opposed to the city at large.
Exactly.
Theoretically, it shouldn't be that way. And if you do have some at-large councilors, maybe they can
Like a
balance
mixture,
that out.
right, exactly.
I mean, the number we currently have, 9 councilors. I think we have 7 wards, I
We have
believe.
7 wards, right.
So if you had 7, but again, it would be very, I guess the majority would clearly be 7 people focused on one little area.
right.
But maybe that's the best, and I think we don't know it, you know, and I think so exploring it and exploring things like, a big thing I do feel strongly about, for example, like the mayoral term is only 2 years.
Oh, I
That's
know.
not enough.
It's not enough
Because it's
time,
like
I
you get
agree.
elected and you do the job for 1 year and you spend the next year running for re-election.
Exactly.
You know, and really I think you need a 4-year term, particularly in that position, to really give yourself a chance to implement whatever changes you're trying to bring about.
I agree. It's just not a long. Well, you
Yeah.
can imagine a president doing it. I mean, that's like on a bigger
Scale,
You
but
can't
yeah,
even do that.
absolutely,
Exactly.
yeah. Yep.
Well, listen, we are running out of time, but I just want you to ask you to please let people know where they can get in touch with you on your campaign, if they have questions or concerns, anything. Where can they get in
Absolutely,
touch with you?
thank you. Yeah, so I do have a Facebook page, Tim Jordan for Haverhill, so they
Yes.
can check me out there.
Okay.
Obviously, my City of Haverhill email address, which you can get off the city website.
Okay.
You can call me. Obviously, I'm a financial consultant. My phone number, Jordan Financial and Insurance Services, is in the book. The number will get to me if you call me there. So you can reach me a lot of places, and obviously, as you know, I'm around town in a lot of
You
places.
are, and
so,
I
yeah.
cannot say it enough. Our city councilors are so available for us. You are.
Thank you. Yeah.
We call you. I mean, I'm not saying that you're there, 24/7, but you do get back to us by an email or call. You guys are great.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you. We are out of time. I wish we had more time, but we're
Yeah.
going so well. But thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming in.
Thank
Tim.
you so much for having me
And
here.
the best of
Yeah,
luck.
I appreciate it.
You're welcome.